Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm very excited tonight because I've been a fan of this woman for a very long time. She had stints on LA Law, Seinfeld, but we all remember her on NYPD Blue as Detective Adrienne Lesniak, and she was tremendous on there. And it is my honor to introduce to you Miss Justine Miceli. And Justine, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor for me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So, Justine, I think the love for acting began when you were like 5 years old. Your mother took you to an acting class in your neighborhood.
Yes, you have a good memory.
Yep. Yeah. So talk about that a little bit, because I mean, at 5 years old, listen, you know, you're starting kindergarten. I mean, you have to kind of be mature real quick when, 5 years old, you're still kind of.
I wasn't exactly academic. Yeah. I was very theatrical. Yes, there was a neighborhood drama and dance studio run by a woman by the name of Miss Rose. And most of the children in the neighborhood had joined her studio. And I first came on as a dancer. And then I began to take her acting classes. And then she would have performances on Broadway stages at the end of the year. And I was doing my scenes, and all of a sudden I see her mouthing the words to me. And I had taken a moment. I had just taken a moment in the scene, and I looked at her and I said, "I know my lines." And I went back to the scene.
And needless to say, sometimes when you're that young and you're doing things like that, you don't always end up getting into the business. So it's pretty remarkable that you eventually got there. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, I mean, you grew up in Sunnyside, Queens, and I was thinking about this today. I'm a big Yankees fan, but I do know that when you were like 2 years old, that's when the Mets came to Queens. Were you a Met fan growing up?
Yes, my Aunt Florence got me a Lady Met pin, and she had me join the organization for Met fans when I was a young child.
Right. And the thing is, too, Justine, is, tell me what is the toughest part about whether it's theater, acting, whatever it is, even at a young age, like not so much 5 years old, but as you got older, what is the most challenging part about it?
I think the most challenging part of it is understanding your character and bringing it to life, and also memorizing lots and lots of lines.
Yeah.
Is the biggest challenge.
Right. So tell me about this, Justine. I believe you were 18 years old and you got a scholarship to Cal Lawrence.
CalArts.
Or Caller, I'm sorry. And I mean, that is pretty impressive as well. And I mean, in a lot of ways, that kind of really helped you throughout your career going forward, correct?
Well, in the beginning, from 14 to 18, I attended the High School of Performing Arts.
Yeah.
So that was really the beginning of my career. The first film I did was called The Shopping Bag Lady for the Learning Corporation.
Yeah.
And that was my first little film that I did with Mildred Dunnick, a very old-time actress from the 40s. She was a character actress, wonderful woman. And then I auditioned for a lot of schools, and I got a scholarship to go to CalArts.
Right. And just talk about that, because I've talked to so many different people who've went to the different art schools, especially performing art schools. What was that experience like? Because that really had to be so beneficial to you.
Well, I came from a very structured background, and I came from a Catholic background. So CalArts was very liberal. I mean, very liberal. When my father and my mother came out to settle me into college, we were walking into the dorms, and my father was, carrying the luggage behind us. And my mother went into the dorm, and she went into my room, And she said, "Oh, what a lovely view." And she went up to the window and she turned around and she like gasped and she said, "Get your father. Don't let him come in the room." And I said, "Mom, what's the matter?" She says, "They're all naked by the swimming pool."
Oh man, that's great. And you know, I mean, the little things like that, you know, you never forget things of that nature. But I mean, obviously it doesn't teach you all the rules of the game. You know, you learn certain things, but did you feel, I mean, I always think about this about actors is that they make it look so effortlessly, but I mean, there's got to be times when you're doing stuff you're nervous, but I've never seen one actor ever.
There has never been anything I have ever been in that I wasn't nervous.
Right. And how do you how do you adjust to that, Justine? Because sometimes nerves are hard to get out of your system. Now, once you start going and you start doing the scene or whatever you're doing, the nerve eventually goes away because you get into it. But I mean, initially, just like going out there for the first couple minutes, I mean, how do you stop yourself from, you know, the nerves you get and you're shaking?
You breathe.
Yeah.
You breathe.
Right.
A lot of deep breathing. But interestingly enough, going back into the story, I ran down the hall and I got my father, and he came into the room and he dropped the luggage down, and he said, "Augusta, what's the matter?" That was my mother's name. Yeah. And she said, "I forgot my medication." He said, "What medication are you taking?" She said, "I have medication that I'm taking. I have to go back to the hotel and take the medication." But he said, "I haven't seen the school and I haven't looked at the dorms and I haven't looked at the classes and we haven't gone around the campus." And so she said, we'll come back. We'll come back. So to make a long story short, we went out of the dorms and it was a beautiful, bright day. And we stood in the fields and the wind was blowing, and my father looked at me and he put his hands on my face and he said, "All right, I think it's time you begin your life."
It's good advice when you think about it. Short and sweet, but not bad. You know, daytime soaps, they were a big fixture throughout, you know, I would say 60s through early 2000s. It's a shame that so many of them are gone, but two soaps that were very popular over the years were As the World Turns and Another World. And you were fortunate enough to be on both of them. And I feel like a lot of actors start out in soaps. That's where they get their feet wet. So just talk about that experience being on two popular shows like that.
Well, I was on As the World Turns.
Oh, okay.
I had a brief stint on Another World. I played a rock and roll singer.
Right.
But As the World Turns was about a psychiatrist falling in love with her patient. I think there was a movie out with Barbra Streisand, Prince of Tides. Was that the name of it?
I believe so, yeah.
It was kind of it was loosely based on that. And it was interesting how I got that role, because when I first went up to audition for the soap, I was auditioning for a very aggressive executive businesswoman, you know, that was very powerful and very sort of, you know, bitchy, to say the least. And I auditioned for the role, and I got called back in on another day, and they told me that I got the role of the psychiatrist. So I said to the casting director, I said, "I'm just curious." I said, "I didn't come in for this role. I didn't audition for this role." I said, "How did I get this role?" And he said, "Well, Justine," he said, "you have too much compassion and not enough bitch."
Well, at least he was honest, I guess. But, you know, what's funny about soaps too, Justine, is it's the only place where you can do horrible things and you could still redeem yourself, and they could find the good side of the character. And then the other thing is you could die 100 times and come back to life.
Yes, that's very true.
Yes.
Very hard work, soap. Soap is very it's a very fast pace. You know, it's knowing your lines, hitting your marks, you know, spitting out the dialogue and moving on to the next scene. You know, it's just they just churn it out, you know. Very, very different than primetime television and a theater.
Yeah, and the thing about
you have more of a process.
Yeah, thing about soaps too is, you know, when you do a primetime series, there's a break in between. I mean, and you're filming for once a week, where soaps, it's every day and it's
Every day. Every
so,
day.
I mean, it's a grind, but I mean, so many people have done it for so many years and been successful at it. But
Yes, it's a great experience. It's a great experience. It
right.
is,
So
especially when
Justine,
you're starting out.
yeah. So one of the things a lot of actors do as well is they do commercials, and you did a couple of TV commercials, correct?
Yes, I did. I was Defend Yourself for Clairol.
So talk about that, because I mean, people don't realize, I'm sure you do, but maybe fans don't, how important that is to someone's career. Because even if it's just a commercial, you know, it plays a big role along the way of you getting bigger and better things. So I mean, I feel like when the opportunity is there to do it and you're a young actress, you're not going to say no, as long as everything is you know, fits what you want to do and stuff.
Well, interestingly enough, I was on NYPD Blue.
Yeah.
And I went up for this commercial, and they had a focus group. And on NYPD Blue, there was a possibility that I would portray a lesbian.
Right.
So when I went into the focus, when my commercial was looked at in the focus group, a lot of people had a problem with me portraying a lesbian and representing a Clairol product.
Right.
So I called up my attorney, and I said to them, I said, I very much want this commercial. I said, I cannot believe that I'm being turned down based on something that I'm not even going to be portraying, because they switched the storyline on NYPD Blue. They did not go in that direction.
Right.
So I flew myself out to New York, and I met the head of the gentleman that was the head of the division. And I walked in, and he looked at me and he said, "Would you color your hair?" I said, "Yes." "Would you cut your hair?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, you got the job." So I took the initiative to bring myself out, because if I had left it up to my agents to negotiate that, they would have just basically, went along with their decision. But I felt I needed to be in front of them and for them to take a look at me. So it was called Daily Defense, and I walked in the street and, talking about the shampoo, and then I went, "Defend yourself."
It's funny too. That's probably one of the easiest roles you ever got. Simple thing, cut your hair and, color your hair. I mean, not a bad idea. But I think the first big break that I remember is Law and Order. And it's a funny story there, because a gentleman by the name of Joe Stern, he had cast you as a stand-in. And what was funny was you kept hounding him that whole season saying, "When are you going to cast me again?" And
yes, I did.
He had told you, "I can't cast the same character or the same actress in the same season." And you said, "Listen, do my hair up a little different or whatever. Nobody will even notice." So talk about that and, getting that role.
Well, I played a clerk in an office, and I played a borough girl, a very strong accent. And I did that scene with Chris Noth. And then that aired. And then the next part came up where I play a very high-class girl. I come from the boroughs, but now I've gotten a taste of money and high life, and I don't want to leave it. And I wanted that role very badly. And so that's when I approached Joe if I could audition for it. And he basically said, "I can't cast the same actress in the same year, And, I said to him, I said, "Well, they're very different characters. One's a borough girl and one's a high-end girl. And, we'll just, change it up and, let me audition for it." And I did, and I got the role, and, the rest was history. But he was a wonderful man. When I was on the show, I was playing an extra. And he said to me one day, he said, "I think it's time for you to learn, and I'm going to put you as a stand-in. And that way you'll, get to know the set and the cameras and, the markings and all that kind of stuff. And so he was very instrumental in my beginnings.
Yeah, and you always hear about people like that. And I always say this too, Justine, is sometimes they don't get the credit they deserve. And I always felt, and I hate what TV does now, because when the ending credits are coming, you don't even have time. Like they show it so quick, you can't tell whose name it is. But in the 80s, 90s, you always saw the ending credits. You would see who did the makeup. You would see who did the camera work, who direct, anything. And people don't realize just how important the behind the scenes people are to show a film. They're just as important as the actors.
Yes, they are. They
Yeah.
are. They are.
So Justine, NYPD Blue, it was such a groundbreaking series, and you came on the second season, and we're going to get to your character and stuff, but interestingly enough, you were up against two women, which, you went for the role. And the funny thing is I think you put something on, something about your hidden talent or whatever it is, that you could drive a stick shift. So,
yeah, that was skills, and I would do a lot of extra work. And so if you knew how to drive a stick shift, that was an added skill that you could possibly drive a car with a stick shift and get paid for it. So yes, at that point I was putting down everything and anything to get work and to get a job.
And the funny thing is that Stephen Boschko said to you, he goes, what does this skill mean or whatever? Like, he saw it. But I mean, I think sometimes too, when the little things like that, when you put something down like that, not that, like, I think you got the role because you did a great job with the audition, but I'm sure when somebody like Steven sees something like that, he could see that there's a personality there and there's a sense of humor there. So that has to play a little in your favor sometimes as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me about, you came on the second season, and I think that David Caruso.
Well, I actually had auditioned for the first season. I had auditioned for Amy Brenneman's part. Amy Brenneman had gotten the role. And the following year, Lexa Vogel, I had auditioned for her.
Yeah.
And the producer had flown in to meet with me and to make his final selection of who he was going to bring out to Los Angeles. And I was one of the girls. It was very exciting, very nerve-wracking. They put me up at a hotel on Olympic Boulevard. Yeah. And I was with my girlfriend that evening, and she said, you're going to get this. And I said, oh, please, I'm up against two other women. I said, the stakes are very high. And she says, yeah, but they brought you out from New York.
Yeah. And, New York has always been like, you're from there, and you even went back there for about 8 years. And, so New York has always been your hometown, which, like I said, is probably helps. But I really believe that, they just saw how talented you were. But this show was so popular in the first season, and they had to deal with David Caruso leaving the series. And I believe, you mentioned Amy. I think Amy had left the show right when David did. She went to ER, if I remember correctly.
Yes, she did.
You kind of had to come in there, and that's got to be a little nerve-wracking, because you don't want to come there and mess anything up. You just want to keep the train going, keep it going.
Exactly. Well, I had an article in the New York Times that said, "Who's a new blue detective who ain't Jimmy Smits?" That was in the arts and leisure section of the New York Times on a Sunday. That was pretty incredible. Yeah.
But you think about this, you weren't alone. There were so many actors from season one, and then as time went on, that came on that series that maybe didn't have the notoriety that somebody like Dennis Franz had. And even Dennis, he had done Hill Street Blues, but this was really his big breakout,
yes.
series.
Yes.
But you talk about Gail O'Grady, Gordon Clapp, both of them, they had just guest starred on stuff, and they really hadn't made it in the business. And so many of these actors just did such a phenomenal job. And Gordon, he ended up winning an Emmy. So, that's really the talent of great writing, great directing, and knowing how to cast the right people, because, the show never missed a beat, no matter who they brought in.
No, it didn't. It didn't. Although they didn't keep many of the females very long.
Yeah, I think Kim.
There was a turnover of females, except I think the longest woman who stayed on the show was Kim Delaney.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they even they had talked about doing a reboot, and Kim was going to play the lieutenant, which
Yes, they
yeah.
do the reboot, but it didn't go anywhere.
Right. But the one thing that I remember about your character, and obviously we'll get to season 3 and stuff, but I remember that first season you were on, and there was that one scene, and I apologize for forgetting the actor's name, but he had that cup, and it was kind of Adrienne.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Yeah, and you smash the cup, and you don't think anything of it. Your character doesn't think anything of it, but it really affected him because it was about some guy that he worked on the police force, and he was really upset. And then you see your character almost feeling compassion for him during that moment. But I mean, how did you feel about your first season on the show? I mean, did you feel comfortable by the end of the season that you had really established yourself as one of the core of that group?
Yeah, it took a while to feel comfortable and to feel confident and secure. Things were moving very fast. I was coming into a top 10 show. I was working with incredible actors. Things were moving very fast. There were events to go to, red carpet events, a lot of stuff that I wasn't really familiar with, that I had to get myself familiar with and get comfortable with, getting representation, trying to get to the next level of your career, especially when the summertime came. You wanted to be able to be involved in some sort of a project in between, shooting the television series. So there was a lot of there were a lot of learning curves, but I managed.
Yeah, and initially, your character had a romance with Detective James Martinez.
Yes.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the chemistry you both had. I mean, it was funny too because one of the things about your character was she didn't take any nonsense. She stood up for herself. She fought for a lot of I always felt like that character fought for the women in that department because it was just your character, and I believe at the time it was Kim's character. So, I mean, I really like the type of character Adrienne was because she didn't take any nonsense. But I really thought that relationship was going to be great for the series, and then they kind of switched gears. But at the same time, I really enjoyed that storyline, and I think what happened was David Milch really pushed for you to have a kissing scene, but Steven wasn't for it. Correct?
They were thinking about making my character gay.
Right.
And David was for it. Steven was not.
Yeah.
They were ready for it the following season.
Right.
But that particular season, they were not ready for it. So I was for it because I thought that would be a challenge. I mean, especially being gay and being an officer of the law, and also possibly, like if they had made my character more ambitious, moving up the food chain, something like that would have probably been concealed. And that would have been a challenge, or a conflict with the character, but I don't know. I just, they didn't want to go in that direction.
And I really felt like it was
very disappointed.
Yeah. And I really felt like it was being received well. And I thought that there was a lot of potential there to really, season 4, I think you were gone after season 3, but season 4, they actually had a storyline and it involved
Charco and with Gordon Clapp.
Yeah. And, he was a father,
surrogate father.
Yeah. To the 2 women who were going to have a baby. And they really did a great job with that storyline. And I just always said to myself, it's too bad that your character wasn't allowed to kind of be involved in that storyline, because I could have seen, you know, you being one of the women in there, and that would have been so good. But what really bothered me more than anything else, Justine, is they just kind of wrote your character off with really no explanation. And
I went out for a cup of coffee and I never came back.
Yeah, and you were actually in Rome, right? Filming Dangerous Beauty. And,
yes, I was.
Yeah, and you got this call that they said they weren't going to bring your character back. So, I mean, nothing gets better than being in Rome, but then you get this news, and it's almost like they ruined that great experience in Rome for you. And it just disappointed me, which I'm sure it disappointed a lot.
Well, when I got the news, I went and I took a bath. It was the longest bath that I ever took. The water got so cold. Finally, I was convinced to get out of the water. I just was in shock, you know, because I didn't see it coming. And I was very attached to the show. And I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave, but I had no choice.
Yeah,
so,
and that was, you know.
But, you know, you learn, you know, it's the nature of the business, you know. You get a role, you get on a show. It doesn't mean it lasts forever. You know, it can be pulled from under you in a nanosecond. And, you know, it's a very fine line to say, well, that's just the way it is. Move on to the next. Don't take it personally. But I took it very personally. Yeah. I took it very personally. I felt there was something I did to create that situation. And, you know, it took me a while to really come to terms with it and to forgive myself and to realize that it was totally out of my control.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, is like when you're not given an explanation really, and you just kind of find out from your agent, and that's never fun. And you had
it's a funny thing. I always feel, you know, in life, you know, I'm a big communicator, and I always felt, you know, I would have liked to have known the reason why. Not that I would have been confrontational or argumentative, but maybe it would have helped me learn something for the next situation or for that situation. You know, it's a learning curve, and I look at it in those eyes. But a lot of people don't want to approach you because they think you're going to give them a difficult time. Yeah. And for me, there was no closure. I had to find closure on my own. But like I said, it was my first big experience. It was my first big show. You know, I had grown very attached to it. You know, it was hard to say goodbye. It just was hard to say goodbye.
Yeah.
You know?
You had a 5-year contract, but it was in their favor, right? Meaning they could kind of rip it up anytime they wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's got to be hard as an actress or an actor too, when you have this contract, but you know that like really there's no leverage for you. Like if they decide this is it, you know, you're off the show and you don't get, you know, paid anymore. I mean, so even when you have that contract, you always have that thought in the back of your mind, well, I know this contract is only as good as.
Nothing is a guarantee. Nothing is a guarantee. You have to, you know, get the role, enjoy the experience, and know that it can be taken from you tomorrow, and just move on, onward and upward, and go to the next situation.
Right.
You know?
Now, one of the things about being on that show, obviously you had 2 great storylines, but the other thing is too, there's always an episode or 2 that I think you really enjoy doing. Was there any one particular episode that you loved doing more than the others while you were on that show?
Oh, I think my favorite was when I told Sipowicz off.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorites. And I enjoyed working with David Caruso.
Yeah. And he was a good actor.
I thought he was a very, for me, I thought he was a very selfless actor, and I thought he was a very generous actor. And, you know, I really enjoyed the little exchange that I had with him. I was sad to see him go. There obviously was a lot of controversy that I was not really privy to and didn't really understand, you know. So, you know, I just kind of saw everything at face value, and I wasn't really reading between the lines. But I enjoyed working with him very much. I have to say that I enjoyed working with everyone on that show.
Yeah.
They were all very generous and very present, and it really was a great company. It really was.
Now, let me ask you, I don't know if you were gone. I mean, you were gone by the time Jimmy left, but one of the reasons Jimmy left is a lot of times he felt like the episodes were being written on the fly, like he wasn't told in advance. I mean, did you see that while you were on the show, that sometimes they didn't really like?
Oh, sure. There were last minute changes all the time.
Yeah.
There were last minute changes all the time. And you just had to, you know, do it.
Right.
You just had to do it.
Now, just from a fan standpoint, I mean, I know you weren't on the show after season 3, and there were a lot of changes throughout the show. But one of the things I never liked was how Dennis's character was awesome, and they did a great job with his character. But what really bothered me, we were just talking about the reboot. In the reboot, they have his character murdered. And I really felt like for NYPD Blue fans, that was insulting because throughout that entire run, they made his character just have unhappiness. His son dies, his wife gets killed, his other son gets leukemia. He's got, you know, he loses a partner, 2 partners that died, and then he's murdered in the reboot. I just felt like it was like a terrible ending for his character. I understood that the actor wasn't going to be on the show, but I didn't think if they had him pass away, that's fine, but not by murder. That to me just like typifies that character's life, and I never liked that, you know. So like, what were your thoughts on that? I mean, would you, as an NYPD Blue fan, if you were just a fan, would you think that like that was kind of disappointing to the fans how they ended that character?
I wasn't really sure where that came from, why he got murdered.
Yeah, I think because they wanted to have the character, you know, they wanted to have his son Theo
investigate it and go after it and find the murderer. And yeah.
I just thought it was kind of for NYPD Blue fans, it was kind of a terrible way to kind of end that character. If he passed away from just passing away, that's, you know, fans can't really complain about that. But being murdered, I just thought like, I'm almost glad that the series didn't go on because I didn't want to remember that character. That's how it ended for him.
No, you have a point. You have a point.
Right. So, you know, you've been fortunate in your career to do a lot of different things, and 2 shows that were very popular, one in the 90s and one in the 2000s, were The Sopranos and Seinfeld.
Oh, yes.
And you got to be on the pilot of The Sopranos. And I wanted to ask you that. You were only in the pilot, but could you see just by doing that first pilot, that episode?
Well, I had auditioned quite a number of times for the psychiatrist role.
Oh, that would have been something if you got that. I mean,
that would have been wonderful. Yeah. But Lorraine Bronco is just absolutely fabulous, and she got it. Interestingly enough, we were doing a reading, and the whole cast was together, and they had changed the location. And Lorraine wound up coming late because she got mixed up with the location change. And David Chase had asked me, you know, would you read the part of the psychiatrist until she gets here? And I was just having a wonderful time. And then all of a sudden Lorraine said, I'm here. It kind of was over. But I went up to play Stevie Van Zandt's wife.
Yeah.
Did not get cast in that. I also was up to play James Gandolfino's sister that lived in Albany.
Oh, Barbara. Yeah.
But I didn't get that.
Yeah.
And then I got the nursing director.
Right. And let me ask.
Unfortunately, no name. I had no name.
Right. Just but you know, hey, you could always say you were in the first episode. But let me ask you, could you tell as an actress just by filming that, you know, first episode, could you see that like something was going to be special about that show?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. The script was brilliant. Yeah. I had an opportunity to read the script, which was really great, you know, because I was auditioning for the psychiatrist. So I got to read the script and I got to read several scenes. So yeah, it was something very special. It was something very special.
I always look at just the writing and how well the writing was done. I mean, because there was never really
so tight. The writing was so tight.
Yeah. And one thing about Chase is he didn't want anybody to try to ad lib or anything. He would always say, stick to the script. The way we wrote it is the way we want you to do it. Where
exactly.
You do other shows, sometimes they'll let you do that, but he didn't want that. He wanted it exactly the way it was written.
Most shows want you to stick to the script.
Yeah.
Yes. They want you to stick to the script. They don't really, some shows allow improvisation, but mostly they want you to stick to the script.
Right. So talk to me about Seinfeld as well. Tremendous show. It's funny how popular that was, because that was really a show about nothing. That was always the joke, that it was just simply about laughter. There was never any serious moments in the show. It was just, making fun of each other throughout the show. So talk about doing that one episode, because it had to be fun just to do that.
Well, originally there was an episode with Jeannie Garofalo. Do you remember her?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was up to play that role. We had done all the rehearsals, and I went home that evening. The next day was going to be the taping, and I was very unsettled. I was very uneasy. I felt something was off. Something was not right. I felt I was very miscast in the role. And I could see something was up with the director, Andy Ackerman, and also with Jerry Seinfeld. But I couldn't turn to them and say, look, this doesn't feel right.
Right.
I couldn't really do that. So I went home and I thought, well, I'm just going to go for it and hope for the best. The phone rings and it's my manager. And they said they've recast the role. Now, before that phone call came in, I said to my boyfriend at the time, I said, Jeannie Garofalo needs to be in this role because she can impersonate Seinfeld. I don't do impersonations. That's not my shtick.
Yeah.
So when my manager called up, they said they recasted it and they cast Jeannie Garofalo in it. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that. What are the odds of that? So my boyfriend says to my manager, he said, look, she went through a whole week of rehearsals, and I really think they owe her a phone call. They need to talk to her.
Yeah.
And so the next day, Jerry calls. I'm not in the house. So he was told that I was out, and he said, okay, I'll call back. And then he called back, and he finally got me. And he said to me, we really enjoy your work. We're a big fan of yours from NYPD Blue. He said, and I will give you my word, I will find the right role for you. I'm paraphrasing at this point.
Yeah.
But he said, I will find you the right role. And he did. He found me the right role. He found me Nina, and he cast me in it. And I have a lot of respect for Jerry Seinfeld because he really is a man of his word.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, I've never really heard anybody say a bad thing about him.
No, there's nothing bad to say. He's absolutely wonderful. And I was so grateful for that experience to work with everybody. That was an incredible experience. It was just fun all day long, lots of laughter, just people having a good time. And it was wonderful. It was the best experience that I had, was working on Seinfeld. And it still does wonderful things for me, because now I do signings, for the role of Nina, at conventions. It's so interesting that a character like that, in a show is so popular amongst people.
And that was the thing about that show, is if you were on one episode, or say even 5 episodes, and you weren't on it all the time, but if you were just on those couple episodes, fans never forgot those characters because those characters were so important. I mean, think about the soup Nazi. I mean, he was very popular.
Very popular.
Yeah. And then, I mean, even the different girlfriends that Jerry would have or George would have. I mean, that was the thing about that show, is that no matter who they brought in there, even if they did one episode, that show was so big and so popular that fans to this day can remember. If you brought up Nina, fans will remember it. You know, if you bring
I'll tell you, Mike, when I was on NYPD Blue, I was working all the time. I didn't really have time to go home and watch television.
Yeah.
So I knew of shows, but I wasn't really watching the shows.
Yeah.
So when I went up for Seinfeld, I called up one of my dearest friends, Vic Shakukian, and I told him, I said, "Oh, I got cast on Seinfeld." He says, "Do you know what it's about?" I said, "No, I have no idea. Yeah. I haven't seen a single episode." He said, "Well, you better start watching." He said, "Because it's absolutely about nothing." Yeah. So that was my introduction.
And it was so popular. I mean, it was the #1 show for a very long time. So, I mean, you've had so many great roles in your career. And, you know, I mean, I'm sure you feel very appreciative of that. But let me ask you, for a while, you really had to give up acting. You had to kind of go away from it. There were more important things. How tough was it to give up acting for a while?
It was tough, but I chose to take care of my mother, especially the last 5 years of her life. And, you know, I had given up. I wasn't acting, and I was a professional organizer, which was supplementing my income when I wasn't acting. And we all need survival jobs. Yeah. I would do jobs here and there, but it wasn't a steady work. My focus was her, running her life, taking care of her full time. And it was one of the best experiences that I ever had. You know, because I was with her, with my sister and my husband and my brother-in-law. We all surrounded her and we held her until she took her last breath, and she was in her home. And that's exactly where she belonged. Yeah. I was very happy that we were able to provide that for her. And I never thought anything was being taken away from me, because this was a woman who raised me for 18 years of my life very selflessly. And I want to give back to her. She was a wonderful woman. She was a selfless woman. She was always interested in you and what you had to say and what you were thinking. And she was never a meddlesome mother or a mother-in-law. You know, she was very fashionable. You know, she was just a great woman. So I was very fortunate.
Yeah. And, you know, all the work in the world and acting can't compare to that, because, I mean, you know, you knew your mother your whole life. You saw her every day. And, I mean, it can't compare, no matter what roles you might get in the past or in the present, being able to spend those last 5 years, even though it was tough, because it's not easy to watch your parents be sick and see that they're struggling, but to still be there with her. I mean, you wouldn't trade that in for anything.
No, nothing. And you know, my family and I relocated her at 86 out to California. She completely left her life in New York, and packed up a truck and came out here. And for the first 10 years was really wonderful. She was very independent. You know, she made friends her own age. She made friends with my friends outside of me, where they would socialize and do things together. And she had a very full life here in California, you know. But then things started to slow down and she started losing mobility. And, you know, I became her legs and her arms.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, like I said, it's a tough thing. We both know what that's like. You know, it's not.
Yes. And you lost your mom.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not easy. And I'm sure, you know, in life, there's always regrets, but I'm sure that's one regret you never have, is giving up acting, because had you not given up acting, you don't get to be with her as much as you were those last several years.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And,
There's no regrets there.
Yeah. And speaking of regret, Justine, I had Karen Richmond on not too long ago. Great actress. I, admire her as a person too. And one of the things she told me was, in this business, you try not to have any regrets because you know that you have to always prepare yourself to be disappointed. It's never going to, not everything is going to be a great, you're going to get disappointed in times. So she never said she had any regrets. And I think that would probably be the same way how you feel, because you've been able to do different things. And I think you're just happy that you were able to have the work you had. You were on a successful series in NYPD Blue. You got to be on Seinfeld. You were on Law and Order, another successful series. You got to do different movies, Dangerous Beauty, which is a great one. So, I mean, I don't think you look back in your career and ever say
I'm very fortunate. There are actors and actresses that never came close to the opportunities that I had. And so I'm very grateful for that, and I remind myself of how fortunate I have been. I've been very fortunate. So I'm very grateful every day that I had those experiences.
Right. Well, Justine, this was a lot of fun for me. Like I said, I've admired your career forever, and NYPD Blue growing up for me, it came out when I was in high school. That was my favorite show. And I just thought you hit a home run on that show. And
well, thank you.
I want to look back and say, they should have kept you on longer. You keep doing that, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. But I do wish that character had more time. I don't think it was fair, but I really appreciate what you brought to that character and what you gave to fans like myself all the time, because we really enjoyed that show and the character Adrienne. She was tremendous. But I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today, because it was a real honor.
You're very welcome. It was so nice to meet you finally.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I really do appreciate it, and just keep up the great work. And I hope to see you working for many years. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Take care. Good night.
That's the one and only Justine Miceli, a tremendous actress, tremendous person. As you just saw in this last hour, she's gifted as an actress, but she has all her priorities in the right place. And I always look at this, for somebody who watched my mother struggle for so many years, I could really relate to what it's like. And the fact that she walked away from, acting, it's not easy for people to do, but she realized that family always comes first. So in my eyes, as tremendous of an actress as she is, she's an even better person. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right.